Yo, what's up? The new banner for FLINS just came out, and I want to go over how valuable this banner will be for veterans and free-to-play players. So, let's get started. Okay, so the two new banners are FLINS and YELAN, and then the 4 stars are Aino, Sucrose, and Dori. So, these are some pretty alright 4 stars for the banner. If you're a new player, this is going to be actually a pretty solid banner if you are getting FLINS. And then YELAN's banner, it's okay, it's not really that great. If you're pulling for YELAN, you're probably a new player anyway, so it might be better, but we'll get into it.
Are you tired of painstakingly farming for Primo Gems? Want to make sure you have enough to guarantee that next 5-star character or weapon? Level up your savings with Lootbar. Whether you're topping up your Genesis crystals for the new Luna 1 reset, or grabbing a Blessing of the Welcome Moon, Lootbar has you covered with incredible discounts on not just Genshin Impact, but a variety of other games. Don't miss out on these deals. Use my link in the description to get started and give your gaming wallet a major break today. Okay, so FLINS is an Electro Hyper Carry Lunar Charge DPS who enables Lunar Charge reactions for the team. He has a base attack of 352 at level 90 and a crit damage ascension. FLINS' playstyle is revolved around using mini bursts during his skill window to deal direct Lunar Charge damage, similar to how Farisa is played. The most updated versions of his kit have him dealing roughly around 105k to 107k team DPS in his rotations in his premium team, and is on the strong side of carries currently in the game, only being beat out by the likes of Farisa, Skirk, and Mawika. FLINS is currently in a unique situation comparable to how Kenichi was in 5.0, where we were wondering how the future units would impact him because of a gap in Kenichi's teams when he was first coming out. Well, this team has a similar problem because of how the Hydro slot fits, and as well as we don't truly understand the future potential of this unit without Columbina's information. So keep that in mind when you are pulling for this unit. There is the potential for things to change in the future. Okay, so looking at FLINS right now, objectively, he is probably the 4th best DPS in the game when it comes to the premium teams, and he has a very nice premium team that doesn't overlap with a lot of the other premium teams. He doesn't steal characters from other teams. He doesn't take Bennett from Mawika, doesn't take Farina from Skirk. He has a very isolated type of team, making it so that it's a very solid 3rd choice option in like Stygian Onslaught. Because his teams are not necessarily best in slot for anyone else inside of the best premium teams, FLINS has the advantage of being a strong hyper carry and not impeding on your pre-existing teams. The big catch though is having an Efa. Efa is a very strong partner to FLINS, and I wouldn't go as far as to say Escoffier levels of reliance, but it's probably a bit more reliant than what Emily was to Kenichi, so keep that in mind. And if you do not have an Efa, the power level of FLINS does go down a bit dramatically, so it is very, very recommended for you to have an Efa if you are going to pull FLINS, but the power level and power budget you do gain from his C1 or his R1 is roughly similar to the power budget you gain from just getting an Efa, so you can kind of make up for this by just getting Constellation or Signature. Right now, I don't know how willing I would be to recommend pulling for FLINS. He's mainly a middle-of-the-pack DPS right now, who will probably get better in the future with the likes of Columbina, but I wouldn't say that right now he's definitely going to get better than the others with Columbina. So if I was to recommend you to pull, I would recommend you to pull with the advisory that you should probably wait for Columbina to release, then pull FLINS on a rerun to see his true power and his true power budget, because after the Lunar Charge shilling is over, there is a chance that he does fall off. Next, let's talk about YELAN. YELAN was released in 2.7, making her a few years old now, but she's held up relatively well when it comes to aging compared to the other units. Example of that is how she wasn't added as a constellation you can select to temper thyself and journey far. So this can kind of show you that she isn't completely out of the meta, but we will go over why I think you probably shouldn't pull her as of right now. YELAN got released in 2.7 and she held out through the meta all the way through Sumeru and then into early Fontaine, when she only started to lose some value when New Valette area came around. Then she started to pick up some more value again at the end of Fontaine with Arlecchino and Clorinde, then completely dropping off once again with early Natlin, and only recently receiving a little bit more attention with the likes of Skirk, and then now a little bit with FLINS. So I don't really see her gaining a lot more value in the future because of how her trend has been, and how it looks like we're going to be getting more 5-star premium Hydra support options, likely Columbina, in my opinion, who will probably replace YELAN in a lot of these teams. So that's why right now I wouldn't recommend for anyone to pick up YELAN, regardless if she is best in slot for a team that you currently run.
I don't really think there's many teams where she is best in slot, but that would just be my personal recommendation before I go over the stuff that she can do. So the stuff off the top of my head where I can think about best case scenarios where you're using Yelan is double Hydro for Hu Tao, double Hydro Wheelchair for Wanderer, second Hydro slot for Skirk alongside Farina, Arlecchino with the new Anefa Overvape teams, those are pretty strong, and then like the Llama Driver Hyper Bloom teams with double Hydro with Xingqiao. She also has some use cases with the new character coming out in 6.1, forewarning for leaks, I'm about to go into Nefer. So she will have some uses with Nefer when it comes to generations of Bloom Cores to make it more consistent to guarantee that you're going to be getting your charge attacks. So that's another thing that we still aren't sure of, but keep in mind for that. So like I said, I wouldn't really recommend pulling for Yelan in 2025. She does have some use cases, but I don't think that those justify using your Primo Gems on her. Specifically, if you are a free-to-play or even if you are a whale, there is a high possibility that she does get power crept very soon. Okay, let's get into the 4 stars. So let's start off with the brand new 4-star Aino. Aino is a very, very interesting unit. She doesn't necessarily herself provide anything spectacular in a base kit without constellations, but her constellations do ramp up and they do give a somewhat semi-buff to the characters released in Nodcry. So first off, let's go ahead and talk about what Aino does. Aino is an off-field Hydro Plier with a very low cooldown and a very low burst duration, so this allows you to get away with very fast rotations, something that the other Hydro Pliers cannot do, because Yelan has a 18-second cooldown, Xingqiao's with a 20-second cooldown, Farina's with a 20-second cooldown. All of the Hydro Pliers have these long cooldowns. That is not a problem Aino has, so she doesn't limit your team's rotation times. So in a nutshell, Aino doesn't really do anything other than applying Hydro when you're looking at her base kit, but if you start factoring in your artifact set, your constellations, and your held weapon, then you could start amping up the buffs that you provide to your active characters. So because Aino doesn't deal a lot of damage regardless if she has a good artifact set or not, you can get away with running her on a complete buffing set. So because of that, you can get away with running her with all of the Nodcry units right now on Instructor. So all of my calcs I've been running her on Instructor to buff the whole team's EM by 120, and then usually I'm running her on Forest Regalia for the Hyper Bloom or Dendro related teams, and then Favonius Claymore for the FLINS teams. So the reason why this is actually semi-decent is because the EM stat for all of the non-cry characters is actually very, very strong. You take a look at FLINS' direct lunar charge damage, that scales with the elemental mastery multiplier instead of damage bonus. The same thing with Llama, right? Lunar bloom damage scales directly with elemental mastery multiplier rather than damage bonus. So increasing your elemental mastery is essentially the same thing as increasing the damage bonus for the kit. So having a character that can buff the on-fielder's EM and can trigger the instructor set consistently with 100% uptime is very solid. Another benefit for increasing your EM is that it gives you the ability to double dip inside of your stat buffs. So increasing your EM, like we just discussed, increases your own character's personal damage, but it also increases the reaction damage your characters deal, allowing you to get 2 different forms of a damage increase from just the 1 EM buff. Because of all of these factors, like the Nodcry characters not using damage bonus, and then all of the other Hydro Pliers giving damage bonus, the low cooldowns not being increased by the other Hydro Pliers, and the ability to give elemental mastery to the on-fielder, it creates this unique role for Aino that allows her to be the only person in the game to fulfill it currently, where she can buff the on-fielder's EM, manage these short cooldowns, and have the Hydro application. So the real reason that she's actually decent in these teams is not because she's a good character, don't get me wrong. She's not a good character, but she's the only one of the character that is able to do this job. So when you're taking a look at this banner, you might be thinking, hey, I already have C0 Aino for free, I want to get some constellations for my FLINS. So taking a look at the C1, the only constellations that really matter are C1, C2, and C6. C1 increases the active character's elemental mastery by 80. Like we just said, increasing the Nodcry character's elemental mastery is very strong. The C2 basically gives her 2 additional hits of Hydro application during her elemental burst. This might have some relevance in the Arlecchino team with Anefa and Aino, but we're still not sure yet. We still have to wait for constellations in order to test it. This also could have some use later on when we get Nefer because of how the Bloom Core generation is inside of triple Dendro teams, so this could be even better for that. And then C4 is an energy recharge refund. It doesn't really matter because her energy recharge is not that big of an issue anyway. And then C6,
C6 gives your Electro Charge, Bloom, Lunar Charge, and Lunar Bloom reactions a 15% damage increase when you are in the normal state, just as baseline, and then when you're in Ascendant Gleam, which is 2 non-cry characters, you're going to be getting an additional 20% of the aforementioned buffs, meaning you'll get an Electro Charged, Bloom, Lunar Charge, and Lunar Bloom increased by 35%. I wouldn't really recommend pulling for Aino considering the high chance she gets power cut very soon by Columbina, but if you do end up getting constellations while pulling for FLINS, they are very well recommended and very well received considering the very strong buff it is. But I wouldn't tell you to pull specifically for Aino's constellations. She is a 4-star, you are not guaranteed to get them, and she'll probably get power creep soon. Same way as Kachina was in 5.0, this is a 4-star meant to be a placeholder. Okay, let's talk about Sucrose. So, Sucrose is a 1.0 character. If you've been playing the game even a semi-decent amount of time, you probably have this character C6, but if you don't, I'll go over what she does. Sucrose is an EM sharing resistant shredder when you have her on VV, who can also hold TTDS. So, what that basically means is she'll give you 20% of her elemental mastery alongside a flat 50 elemental mastery buff from her A1. Then she'll also give you the 48% attack buff if you're holding TTDS, and she'll reduce the resistances by the swirled element by 40% for 10 seconds if you have her on Viridis and Veneer. The combination of these 3 things is very potent for FLINS, specifically because 1, he loves the EM buff, 2, he loves the shred, and 3, he loves the attack buff from TTDS. So there is a chance that Sucrose gains a lot of value inside of Nodcry because of all the characters being very hard EM scaling because of the way that the reaction damage is dealt through their kit. So getting a copy of Sucrose on this banner if you don't have her might be a semi-good investment, but getting constellations for her doesn't necessarily matter. The C1 only gives you a little bit more energy and her burst doesn't really matter anyway because of her low field time, and then her C6 gives you a 20% damage bonus for the element you infuse, which also doesn't really matter. So I would recommend you just get a singular copy of Sucrose. She usually is an on-banner only thing. She doesn't ever pop up in the stores. So get one copy, stop there. You don't need constellations at all, especially for FLINS. The constellations literally don't do anything for FLINS at all, so just one copy. Alright, let's talk about the most broken character in the game. Dori. Dori is the GOAT. She is a... she's a hyper bloom character where you can basically use her as like a driver when you have her at C6. She's really not even viable until C6. This is a pretty bad character. This is probably the L of the banner if you get Doris. So I wouldn't really recommend using Dori. I wouldn't recommend pulling for Dori. I mean, if you like Dori, you can use her. She is a healer. You know what I mean? Like, you can use her as a healer, but definitely not what you want to see on this banner. So the winners of this banner are brand new players who want FLINS. If you're a new player who wants FLINS and you don't have Sucrose, this is a very good banner for you. But let's say you're a veteran player who doesn't have an EFA and they already have their Sucrose and their Dori maxed, I wouldn't say that this is a very strong banner. The fact that Aino is here and she's always going to be C0 for everyone pulling on this banner because we've only had access to C0 means that you're going to guaranteed get constellations. If you do pull, we're not guaranteed, but if you do get copies, you're going to get constellations. So that is an upside for veterans, but other than that, this banner doesn't really have that many strong upsides, so I would recommend personally skipping unless you already want FLINS, but if you already want FLINS, just pull them anyway, you know? Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and check out my other videos and use my Lootbar in the description. Thank you so much.